during the break, we had some discussions and people asked me a few questions. Just to clarify this discussion here about the clustering of events that mark the time of the end. And what we didn't do in the class were a couple of things, because it wasn't the main focus. But a couple of people asked the question. So the first one, if we did the line of Christ, and we took this from Daniel chapter 9, we know that this is 7 years. And this is AD 27, 31, and 34. And so this would be 3.5 years and 3.5 years. And those 3.5 years, if we were to think about them in times and the dividing of time, they're not literally 1260 days, not literal 1260 days, we understand that, but symbolically you can see that we could place a 1260 here. In fact, you can show that this would be a 2520 because it's 7 years or 7 times. And if we were to put this line upon our history, we could demonstrate that the baptism lines up with 9/11, entering into a covenant with the Lord. And in AD 34, the gospel is no longer exclusively for the Jews, it's now going to go to the world at the stoning of Stephen. So this would be the end of the 490 years, takes you all the way to here, leaving 1810 years to 1844, which marks the 2300 days. So this would be marking Sunday law. And then you could show that this would be demonstrating midnight cry. So when you start developing this line of thinking, then you get from 7 years, 3.5 years, 1260, then we know that the 1260 is symbolized in the scriptures, Revelation 12, by the wilderness. I'll put W for wilderness. This is the wilderness period. So what we can show is that once we have a wilderness, sorry, yeah?
No, I was saying that between 31 and 34, I see the Jewish nation taking the power of state into their hand to persecute their own brethren, which resembles that people with supremacy that we saw in the Dark Ages.
So what my sister is saying, and she's correct, is that you can make all of this a 1260 as well. So there are many ways to understand this, but I was just showing you, because one of my sisters asked, just in the simplest way I could think, is to show, you can see that this is a 1260 from 27 to Midnight Cry, which is a wilderness. And as soon as you say a wilderness, then what you can do is take all the wildernesses and put them here. And there are a couple of wildernesses. There's a 40-day wilderness, there's a 40-year wilderness, and there's a 70-year wilderness and the 1260 wilderness. So the 70 might throw you, but Brother Tabo read a Ellen White passage, I think earlier today, I think it was earlier today, which says that the 70-year captivity parallels the 1260-year captivity. So he read that to you earlier. I think it should be in your notes. So what I'm saying you can do there is that you can take all of those stories and you can start putting them line upon line over this history that we have here of our line from 9/11 to Midnight Cry to Sunday Law, and you can develop further details of what that's going to look like. Does that make sense? Does that sound reasonable? Yeah? So you don't have to accept the 2520 to do this, by the way. You know, if people are still got issues with it, I don't know why you would have, but if you did, this is just straight Daniel 9. You've got 7 years, 3.5 years, and the 3.5 is a type of 1260. And the 1260 we know is a wilderness period. So it's just using that simple idea. Now, as soon as you start thinking about the 1260, the 1260 was cut off into two parts. And Ellen White comments on this. And this is 1773, I think. So the 1260s, all of this, and she says persecution ceased 25 years or a quarter of a century before the end. So are we familiar with that? So you can see that the 1260 has this little bit at the end where the persecution stops. But all we want to show is not so much the dynamics of what happens here and here, but we want to show that it's in two parts. So if I've got a 1260, I'm going to show that there's a part here that's cut off of the 1260 and it's 25 years long. So as soon as you start seeing this structure here, you can see that it's the same structure that we have here. That you've got 9/11 midnight cry, and then you've got this waymark here, which is what we're calling the binding off. So I'm saying that the binding off is 25 years. So we can put the symbol of 25 here. As soon as you start doing that, then you can look for many 25s and start placing them one on top of the other.
But you're not saying a literal 25 years.
Everything that we should understand, and I've stopped saying this now, maybe I should say it every time, nothing is literal, it's all symbolic. Yeah? Because I could just as well put 4 here, 4 years, or 30 years, or 1 month, or many, many different dates. They're all symbols. Everything turns into a symbol. So, hopefully we can see that. Yeah? Is that relatively straightforward? So, I said the 1260 is a wilderness, but we've got 40 days, 40 years, and 70 years. So let's take the 40 days. This is 40 days Christ is in the wilderness. So you can show, and I'm not going to prove this explicitly, but Jesus is in the wilderness for 40 days, and I'm saying the 40 days is here, it ends here, and then he has 3 tests. 1, 2, 3. Now at one level the 40 goes all the way to the end, because the implication is this happens all, at the last day or at the very end. It doesn't extend for days and days past 40. So the 40 goes to the end here, but these 3 are marked at the end of the 40. It says when 40 days are accomplished, then you have these 3. So I'm drawing this 40 in this fashion here, and so you've got 40 that takes you from this point to this point here. Does that make sense? And the reason why that's important is when you make an application about the number 40, and we go to the 40 years of wilderness wandering for the Jews, where does the 40 years begin? What's the event that marks that? You've got to speak up loud, otherwise I won't hear you. I didn't hear what you said. Oh, you weren't sure? No, it starts before the golden calf. I think you said it before. It's before Kadesh Barnea, but they leave Egypt. The first event that happens is the Red Sea crossing. It's the first thing. In fact, is that okay? They leave Egypt, and the first thing that they're going to be confronted with, the first test, if you like, is Kadesh. It's not Kadesh Barnea. It's the Red Sea crossing. Okay, so you've got the parting of the sea at the beginning of the 40 years, and what happens at the end of the 40 years? They cross Jordan, so it's the same thing. Yeah? And the Bible, and Ellen White confirms this, is that Red Sea crossing is a symbol of baptism. They were baptized as they went through the sea. But you know that the children, once they went into the wilderness wandering, they were never circumcised, because at one level the Lord went out of covenant with his people. And so when they get to the end of the 40 years, they're going to have to all be circumcised, and the symbol of that is baptism. So they're all going to get rebaptized. I shouldn't say rebaptized, they're all going to be baptized for the first time. All the children are. So what I'm saying here is that you've got a parting of the seas and a parting of the seas. which are the same event. Does that make sense? So this would be like an alpha and omega. The beginning and the end are the same. You begin in the covenant, you end in the covenant, and it's symbolized by two sea crossings where the waters are divided. Does that make sense? So as soon as you do that, and you bring that into this history, then you can see that 9/11 and midnight have had the same characteristics, which is why I've got this 40 here. So 9/11 and midnight share characteristics, but we also said that the 40 goes from here to here, because the three steps are just really at this point in time. So you can also mark a 40 here if you were to do so. And so 9/11 has the same characteristics as midnight cry. So these are the arguments that you have to show that this history here, 1989 to 9/11, is very similar to midnight cry. The earthquake, I know I've got 1798 here, but it actually occurs in what year? 1755. And the dark day is in 1780. And what's the time difference between these two? 25. So you see you've got 25 and 25. Does that make sense? Yeah, I don't say that anymore because it's everything is. If we have to keep on correcting ourselves, then I'm getting worried about you.
It's not for my sake.
I know. I fully appreciate it for the camera. I understand that. So coming back to this point, so there's where we finished off. There's people who have got discernment, and we're identifying them as people who, I'm going to just say they're good as opposed to bad. Yeah? These are good people, not bad people. So the reason why we're even discussing all of this, let's take some of this out, is because I want us to start thinking. At one level, we've got two groups. I'm not detracting from the two groups, but we have to start conceptualizing the fact that there are three groups and how we're going to deal with these three groups. Am I okay to? Yep. And who they're identifying and what they mean. So I'll say it just, on a basic level. When we go to Matthew 25, and you start applying Matthew 25 to Millerite history, let's have a quick review of that. So we're not going to read Matthew 25 because most of us we're so familiar with it. The virgins are all in their homes, and they're going to do what? They're going to leave their homes. And they're all going to gather to where? Where did they go collect to or gather to? Okay, so maybe we're not as familiar as I thought we were with Matthew 25. Sorry? Okay, so they're actually going to go to the bride's house. They're all going to gather together at the bride's house. And when Ellen White comments on this gathering together, she marks this as 1840. So in 1840, the 10 virgins gather. Is that okay? And what are they expecting? The bridegroom to come. Yeah? And when's he coming? He's not coming in 1844. He's coming in 1843. And he's not even coming at midnight. We're trying to think what they're thinking. Yeah? So they got the invite, they know when he's coming, and he's coming, haven't got a specific date, but they know the very latest that he's going to come is when's the very latest that he's going to come? Oh, can't be 1844. Sorry? April what? No. April 19th. Must be the 18th. The latest he can get there is April the 18th, 1844. And he doesn't come. So he's not there. And so then you get to the 19th, and what do they start doing? They start tarrying. And they're disappointed. And then they go to sleep. Yeah? So they're going to go to sleep now, and then what's going to happen? How many of them go to sleep, by the way? All of them. So they all sleep. And then what happens? So on July 21st, 1844, what happens? Midnight arrives. Yeah? So we have midnight arriving. And then August I don't like doing this without explaining it, and I'm not going to. I'm going to put August 14th and 15th. Okay? 1844, then the cry's made. Sorry. I'm thinking French there. I was going to put CM. Midnight cry happens. And let's work through this narrative then. So they've all gone to sleep, then at midnight the clock strikes, and then 3 weeks later, thereabouts, there's a cry made. And what's the cry saying? Okay, so behold the bridegroom cometh. Where's he coming to? What does that phrase even mean? Behold the bridegroom cometh. So he's coming to the wedding. Some people said, what other answers did we get? So is he coming to the bride's house? Okay, so maybe we're not 100% sure.
The virgins go out to meet him, so he doesn't come to their house. They go out.
So I'll tell you what I think happens, and then you're going to have to go away and study this. So all of them are at the bride's house, and there. What's the job of the 10 virgins, by the way? What are they even there for? Sorry? They're waiting for the bride to come, but they're outside her house.
They're preparing the bride?
Where's the bride's inside the house? The bride's inside her dad's house. Why aren't the 10 virgins inside the house? Why didn't they go inside the house? Why are they outside the house? So they're outside. The whole purpose of being there is to pre-warn the bride that the bridegroom's coming. So you know when that call's made, the bridegroom, behold the bridegroom coming, who's that called to? Because some people think it's actually to the virgins, and it's not. That call has got nothing to do with the virgins. The virgins have actually been sidelined because they didn't do their job. Someone else has had to do their job for them. And that cry is to the bride. It's telling the bride that her husband is on his way. He hasn't arrived quite yet. So he's on his way to pick her up. Are we okay with that? Yep. We're not going to answer this question, but have a think about this. Are they already married? You don't think they're already married? Okay.
When you look at Joseph and Mary's situation, they weren't married, but they were considered married because of the way the whole marriage situation
Okay, so we're not sure. My brother's sure, he's certain, but the rest of us aren't. Okay, so they're outside waiting for him to come so they can warn him, but they go to sleep, so they're not going to do the job. At midnight, someone else is going to make the cry. So then what happens in the story? She comes out of her house, picks up the bridegroom, and both of them start going back where? Going back to his house, because he's come from his house to her house, and then they're going back to his house. So this is the procession that Brother Tabo was speaking about. There's going to be a procession that goes. In fact, it's a really nice study when you start looking at the procession. There are a number of processions that we can discuss. Let's list out the processions, because it's a nice list if you enjoy it. So there was a procession that Brother Tabo said. Which procession was that? We'll begin with that one, which is freshest in your minds. Who's listening? This was Christ going to the cross. Remember? So this is Jesus. I'll put headed to the cross. Another procession. Okay. Triumphal entry. And this is Jesus as well. Another one. Sorry, louder. The ark. Good. Good. Catholic procession. Any more? Oh, is that a procession? Do we know that? I'm not familiar with that. Mordecai, I don't know if that's correct. Sorry? I don't think so. Any others?
Israelites in their journey crossing the Red Sea. Big procession.
It could be. I don't think it's described that way. David, when he dances. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there's one more I can think of. Procession walking to eternal room. Are you looking? So this one, the last one that I can think of, is when Jesus goes to heaven.
So the animals going into the right side of the procession.
Yeah. We got there. The animals. Sorry, yeah. Oh, so that's that one. That's that ark. Sorry, I should have put that ark is the Noah's ark, and this is David's ark when he takes the Ark of the Covenant. And when Jesus goes to heaven, so he does that at least twice. This is AD 31 when he goes to heaven. He takes those first fruits with him, and also when at the second advent when he goes back to heaven. So this is times 2. So all of these processions you can all place at the same point. And where do we place all of them? Are we not sure? All of these are at the midnight cry. And obviously the reason we even mention that is because at midnight cry, when the cry is made, what are the virgins supposed to do? They're supposed to join the procession. Yeah? So we've got Matthew 25. And we know that's at midnight cry, because at midnight they're just still asleep at that level. Cry's made here at midnight cry. They're all awake, and then they go to the procession. So we mark the procession here at the midnight cry. And if you go back into all of these stories, they teach you a lot about what's going on in these events. So in this story here, we'll just fill in the last one, October 22nd. And the reason why we're doing this is what? What was the reason we're looking at this? We've always got to remember why we're looking at something. Sometimes you take so long to explain things, you forgot why we even looked. We're looking at this to see this. Who's the third group? Yeah? Who's the third group? So, who's going to give this cry at midnight? Who's going to be the person that's in this group here? Sorry? In Millerite history? Yeah, can we name them? So this is Samuel Snow. Yeah, this should be relatively easy for us because this is what Brother Tabot's been discussing, the seven thunders of Samuel Snow.
Would it be the first fruits of the 144?
Well, because this is Millerite history, it's not even the 144,000.
Meaning, as far as answering that question directly like the third group.
I don't know if they have to be the 144,000. They could end up being martyrs, couldn't they?
Well,
Do they have to be 144,000? 22nd, good. Thank you. I don't know why I put 25th. October 22nd. So, I'm suggesting this is Samuel Snow. So, Samuel Snow's the person here, and this is why it's so important to understand the studies that Brother Tabot is doing about the seven thunders of Samuel Snow. Because what we're doing at one level is identifying a sequence of events. Is that relatively straightforward? He's identifying a sequence of events to track what's happening. And what was the purpose of all of that? At least for this weekend, one of the main purposes that he said, the purpose of what he's doing. What do you think the reason, where do you think he wants to take you? Sorry? Yeah, so it's all about the prediction before midnight. Yeah? So that would be here. Would that be correct here? The prediction before. Good. That was. You preempted my next question. When was that? So he said it's May the 2nd. Brother Theodore and I were counting on our fingers yesterday, and we confirmed what? What did we confirm?
Yeah, it's the Passover.
Oh, yeah, we confirmed that it was the 14th of the 1st. Okay, so I'm going to take this off because it's going to confuse people. So I'm going to put the 19th, which is what we normally put this as a waymark. And how do you confirm that it's the 14th day of the first month? Someone beside Brother Theodore. How do you know this is the 14th of the first month?
Because April 19th was the last day.
Because April the 19th is the first day of the first month. And all you need to do is just count on your fingers from April the 19th to May the 2nd. If you count, try it over lunch, the numbers work. We've got tested, we've confirmed it. It does work. Okay, so the reason why I'm saying this is because this is Samuel Snow that's going to be doing this work. And Brother Tabot is not dealing with personalities, he's dealing with doctrinal events. But when you see that Samuel Snow is the person who's doing this, then you begin to see that Samuel Snow is here. But this is not real, but what's Samuel Snow's second surname? His name is, or his title, should I say? That was a joke. He's a Millerite. Yeah, so even though here it shows you that he's separate, he's not part of this group, you know that he is because he's a Millerite. And if he's a Millerite, he must be part of the 10 virgins. And you don't even have to think about it that way. It says, Matthew 25, verse 1, then the kingdom of heaven, which is what? The church, all Christians, look like 10 virgins. Yeah? And he's a Christian, he's part of that church, so he must be a what? He must be a virgin. If he's a virgin, he must be part of this group. Yeah? So, this doesn't show a weakness of parables, it shows you the strength of parables. You know, people for so long have said, and who's the ones that give the midnight cry? And it's like this kind of conundrum that's impossible to fathom. And it really isn't when you start putting line upon line, because you see, really simply, who is the one that gives the cry? It's one of the virgins in real life. Yeah? So, I've rubbed it out now, but yes, so in this one here, we had the 11 disciples, Judas Iscariot, and then Jesus. So, are these apostles? Is he an apostle? Yeah? We're okay. Was Jesus an apostle? Yeah. Paul calls him an apostle. So he's part of the foundation, because the apostles were the foundation, and Jesus is what? He's the chief cornerstone, or the chief part of the foundation, the bit that everything hangs upon. So at one level, he's part of the same group. But what we would do, Christians, Adventists, would separate Jesus from the 12. But if you don't separate him from the 12, then it becomes quite interesting, because you can do that when you parallel all these groups together, because then you realize that Jesus in this story is himself a symbol or a parable of who? Someone who has discernment. Yeah? I'm not saying you have to agree with me, but do you see the logic of that? Because people are going to get nervous. You're going to say, are you saying you're Jesus? And you get into trouble when you do things like that. But I'm asking, can you see the logic of that? Yeah? So I don't know why people get nervous about this, because let's do this. Okay, we've said angels here. And we all know what angels they are. What angels are they? From where? Yeah. These are the three angels from Revelation 14. Do you agree with that? So, my brother said from heaven. Are they really from heaven? Do you think? Okay. Do you see those angels as human beings? And you didn't come from heaven. So, they don't necessarily have to literally come from heaven. I guess that's what I'm suggesting. Yeah? Okay, so if we do, let's do this then. Revelation 14, and we would have the first, second, and third. Let's put dates on that. 1798. Good different options? For the second angel? So this would be 1843 or 44. Okay, so this is 1844, April the 19th, and this is straightforward. October 22nd, 1844. Yes? All okay? This is Revelation 14. What about Revelation 10? Where would you place Revelation 10? Do we need to turn there? It won't help you if you turn there because it won't give you any direction of where to place it. Where do we place Revelation 10? And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. So we place that August 11th, 1840. Is that fair enough? Sorry? Yes. 5 minutes, yes. If you see the symbology in chapter 10, verse 1, who's that a symbol of? If you pick that up, we're not going to do a. So this is a clear symbol of Jesus Christ. If you take those symbols and you go to other portions of Scripture, you can show that this is Jesus. Okay? And it says this angel is going to come down from heaven. So here's Jesus. I'll put it as a symbol of a cross. Did Jesus literally come down? No. So we know this isn't Jesus really. Yeah? So what's happening in 1840? You have another man whose name is Lich. And Lich is going to give a message. It's a fulfillment of a prophecy, Revelation 9. And this empowerment is going to kickstart or trigger a chain of events that's going to lead people to October 22nd eventually. Yeah, so this is why we call this as the empowerment of the message. So I put 1A here and 1E here. So coming back to our question, all the symbology here is that this is Jesus in 1840, but we know it's not really Jesus, don't we? Yeah? So what we have to grapple with is when we start taking the parable as it's portrayed in the Gospels, or the parable as it's portrayed in Revelation 10, and we start considering this third group here, we can see that it's Lich who's going to come and bring this message down to God's people in 1840, which is a fulfillment of Revelation 10, but this is a human being. But Lich is a person who's living in the church, kingdom of heaven, at that time, which must make him a virgin. So you see that we could also place Lich here as much as we could place Snow here. And we do that as well when we develop the line of reasoning about what's going on with Lich's prediction. So what I want us to begin to become comfortable with is that the parables clearly teach three groups at one level, but they also only teach two groups. We're not trying to detract from that. It's these wise and wicked, but there's this third group who we showed a number of places that they've got discernment. And because these people are separating the wicked from the wise, and we saw that all of them that we could identify were all good people, we know that these people are wheat. If we're going to use the phraseology of Matthew 13, verse 24. These are the good people who are doing this identification or this discernment work. And that is quite a jump forward in many people's thinking about what the dynamics are in this movement. So at one level you can start thinking about Samuel Snow and the Seven Thunders, about events that are going on. But you must remember that if Brother Tabo was talking about Haggai, and what's Haggai going to be doing? He's making a prediction that something's going to happen. Or Agabus is going to be making a prediction that something... So we could start putting Agabus here, or we could start putting Haggai here. So you begin to see what we are doing is personifying prophets, symbols that are in the scripture, and bringing them into a present-day application. And as soon as you start doing that, people become nervous. I don't know if you become nervous, and I'm not sure why we do become nervous. Because sometimes I think we don't actually think this is a real life thing that's going on. It's some kind of Bible study, and it sounds like fanaticism if you're going to call yourself Jesus, or you're going to say you're Jeremiah, or Haggai, or Agabus, or any of these people. Because isn't that what we're doing? I hope you can all see that that's where this is headed. You know, it's like, if you want to see it in a negative way, this is self-promotion, self-exaltation. Now, I'm not suggesting in any shape or form that it is, but people will identify it that way. But I don't believe that you can separate the events from the people. They have to be one in the same thing. So why all the controversy? I mean, doesn't everybody know in this movement you're either a wheat or a tare? You know, real life. Why the controversy then? I want to suggest the controversy is occurring because all of us are comfortable with talking about something that's going to happen in the future and not right now. So as long as we say, I can always guarantee you, I can't literally, but I can guarantee if all of this study was to say that there's going to be these people with this great discernment here and it's all going to happen in the binding off, there wouldn't be a controversy. There wouldn't be an issue about the truthfulness of that. People would just accept it. Or if we said, these people with discernment can identify wheat and tares, and we're putting it here at the binding off, everybody would be comfortable with that. But now if you start saying, the people with discernment, I'm going to put here for discernment, if we move this from here and bring it here into a present day application, then people begin to be agitated. Because it has implications about the sequencing of events. And that's what this prediction before midnight is addressing. So if you're thinking, come to a prophecy school like this, and you don't understand everything, you say, oh, you know, it all looks okay, don't understand all the details about Agabus and Haggai, and don't know what it means to me. What does it mean to me? If there's a prediction or not a prediction, because it's going to happen anyway. And if you know, if we stand up and say, the prediction is there's going to be warfare between Russia and America, we say, okay, we've got the answer, it's all okay, we'll just sit back and wait. You know, that's what Adventism does, isn't it, about Sunday law? And we all frown upon them from doing that, don't we? You know, we chastise them saying, you can't sit back and wait for Sunday law because you're going to be lost if you do that. So you have to have some kind of participation in this, some active role. Can we see that? And I'm describing the active role as being part of this group. This is where these people who are active, people who are actually awake to the situation. Was Samuel Snow awake to the situation? Of course he was. Yeah? You've been, Brother Bro's already shown you that you go way back to the year before, 1843, then February, then April, then May, then July, then August. He's tracking you through these seven thunders of Samuel Snow. And if you don't get to the point, he's trying to show you, no, I'm trying to show you, I don't know what his point was, that there's someone who's awake to what's going on. He has discernment of things that are happening. And if you think you can just come to prophecy schools and just say, I had no idea what they're talking about, but I heard there's a prediction, and I heard there's going to be some war, and I can't figure it out, I'll just wait for it to happen, you're in trouble. Because what you're going to begin to see, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to even cover it, but as time goes on, you're going to begin to see that this group here, if I call this the wise, I'll call this the foolish and the wise, I'll swap them round, you can begin to see that, in fact, all of these wise people are required to do what? When we think about this prediction before midnight, what are they all required to do? To have oil. And that oil would be a message. And what would the message be? It would be the prediction that midnight's about to happen. So if you think that you can sit back and watch two people fighting and say, I'll see who's going to be standing at the end and I'll join sides with them, where would you be? You're going to be on the wrong side. So in these stories, what they're demonstrating is, out of the 13, only one of them has discernment. I'm going to have to swap these round so you don't get muddled up. But what's actually going to happen in reality is that all of the wise are required to have these characteristics, the characteristics of discernment, to be the servants. And the problem that you face is the way the parables are written, it doesn't open up that opportunity or that option for you. And what you have to do is not break the parables, but you have to work with the parables as they are and understand the fulfillment of those parables and how they actually are going to operate in our lives. So what I'm suggesting is this. So just to summarize, there are two groups, but we can see clearly there's this third group of people who have this discernment because they're awake, like Samuel Snow was. Samuel Snow was a virgin, Lich was a virgin, but they're separate and outside of these two groups at the level of the parable. And when you take the seven thunders of Samuel Snow, these events, you have to realize that it's Samuel Snow that's the person that's driving these events. And Samuel Snow is a real living person, just as you and I are real living people. And you're going to have to, at some stage, reconcile in your own minds the fact that you take messages, events, and put them to people. And that means putting names to those people. Because these people can put names to people. They know who Judas is and they know who Matthew is. Because they have that discernment level. And part of that is dealing with this issue about the prediction before midnight. So if you think you're a passive recipient of the prediction before midnight, you're thinking wrong. You have to understand this, because the understanding is like a feedback loop, and it actually turns you into this person. You're not this person just in isolation. I'll give you an example of this. Say you've got two options for close of probation. We're going to close with this. 1 and 2. And you believe it's here. So this is you. So you think, oh, probation's going to close here. But it really closed here. So what's going to happen to you? You're going to be lost. Okay? But what if that's not you? And this is you. And you say, I think close of probation's here, but it was really here. What's your situation now? Okay, so we've got a mixed response now, because people are saying, well, I'm going to be ready here anyway. So if I'm ready here anyway, I'm bound to be ready here, so I'm going to be okay. But I'm suggesting it's not that way, because what saves us, what converts us, it's the truth. It's these messages that change who and what we are. And if you think that this is where your probation, you think this is where your probation closes, but it actually closes here, you've got just as wrong a message as the person that was over here. A wrong message is never going to help you. So the issue is not where you think the close of probation is going to be, or where you think everything's finalized. It's whether you hold on to the truth or you don't hold on to the truth, because it's the truth that changes you. So it's at that level, it's not so much whether or not this is before or after midnight or where you place things. It's what is the truth and what is not the truth. That's the thing that changes you. So I've run out of time. I'm way past time. So we're going to carry on after lunch with our studies. Let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy. Lord, it's my hope and prayer that these simple studies are the means that you can use to awaken your people to the great danger that each of us is facing before us. Lord, many of us think that this fight, this struggle between truth and error is not theirs, that they'll just wait to see who's been telling the truth and then they'll make a decision. Lord, each of us really knows that this is not the way of the gospel. It's not the way that you led your disciples. It's not the way that's brought to view in the scriptures. May each of us this weekend pay close attention to the truths that are being discussed so that we can be informed and make a decision for right. Be with us, Father, as we go through this preparation day. As we partake of the food now that you've provided for our needs, we pray that it would strengthen us. And in the few remaining hours of this day, may each of us prepare our hearts, our minds and our bodies so that we can meet you once again at the beginning of this Sabbath day. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.